Hey everyone, Christina here, One Creative Direction. Welcome in. Welcome if you're a new subscriber. Welcome back if you're a returning subscriber. If you haven't subscribed, I would greatly appreciate you hitting that subscription bell or notification bell and subscribe. So today we're going to do an updated video for Crystal Brite Tone tips and help. So I do get quite a few questions. Some of them I've answered in videos, answered via comments. But since it's been a really long time since I put out a video for helpful tips for using Brite Tone. So there are some things that I've learned in that period of time since that last video. So I'm going to touch upon some really, really important things, but also go over some new things that I've learned to maybe help if you're using Brite Tone. I also have videos for testing, for all of the Crystal products and other products. They're older videos, but they are testing videos for products that I had thought about using before I landed on Brite Tone. So let's get started. One of the things I want to touch upon is one of the most important things, and that is probably the two most common issues that I see or I get questions about are brush strokes and air bubbles. So in my opinion, those are both related similarly to application. So you can apply, this is widely known, but you can apply Brite Tone with a brush or your finger, whether that's a glove finger or bare finger, it doesn't matter. But it needs to be a nice quality, and this is a very soft brush. I've had this brush for probably 3 or 4 years. Well, probably a good 3 years. Got this when I first started painting for $5. It's a Grumbacher. I think I got it at Michael's on clearance. But I used this. I have several other ones just like it that aren't rounded around the edge like this one is. Couple different sizes. Good quality brush. The harder, rougher the brush bristles are, the more likely you're going to leave marks, right? So the key thing when you're applying Brite Tone is not too thick. It's not resin. You can't just put a big blob on there and let it, level out. It does have self-leveling properties, but you need to help it along. So basically what I do, and this is probably 5 inches round, 4.5, 5 inches. I'll just lay a nice layer of Brite Tone just like that. And I will take my brush, and since my brush is dry, when I first start, I just kind of get it wet so there's not any like straggling bristles, So initially I take it and I spread around the center. And I've got a pretty healthy amount here. But you're basically taking the brush and barely running along the surface, okay? I'm going to try and keep my eye on, I think I just dropped a big blob. I'm going to try to keep myself in the camera view as well as watching what I'm doing on the actual item. So you can see I have I'm trying to keep it in the light and in view. So let's see if I can, hang on. All right. I had to move my other project so I could get in here a little closer. So I am just barely running my brush along here, okay? Now what happens when you push down too far is you create those brush strokes. It's hard not to say breast stroke. Brush stroke. And I'm just lightly going around the edge. So you can see, and this is why I want to do an updated video. I have a better ring light and better lighting in here so you can really see it. So it looks pretty smooth. I don't see any brush strokes. I don't see any air bubbles. So I will tell you, one of the other things I learned, if you're doing pour painting, Penetrol and your cell activator and Brite Tone don't mix. Just FYI. A tiny, tiny amount I think is okay. It does kind of repel the Brite Tone. I even tried to clean it. That didn't work. So I'm going to have to keep that in mind moving forward. So one other thing I learned. So the next thing I want to point out is some new things that I've learned. This is a bigger project. And I know I've had some folks reach out to me and say they were having issues and they want to try it on bigger projects. So I'm going to talk and coat this at the same time. Okay. I just sanded this. And I put one layer on after I sanded, and I'm going to try to keep in camera. So as I try to do 3 things at one time, and that is coat this, talk, and make sure I'm in camera. But basically, a couple of things that I have learned are about sanding and washing the item after you sand it, and washing your brush after you use it in between coats. Obviously, if you're using your fingers, this really isn't applicable, but I learned that alcohol is one of the main ingredients in Dawn Power Wash. And I will be the first to admit that I love Dawn Power Wash. I was using that pretty religiously to clean my brush. Sometimes I would use just the regular Dawn. I have a squeeze bottle with Dawn in it that I've had for quite some time. And I have been using that, and then I discovered Power Wash and started using that as well. There is a lot of alcohol in the Dawn Power Wash version, and you don't want to clean your item with alcohol, nor your brush with alcohol prior to coating. Now, what I have done in the past is left my brush overnight in Dawn water. And that's Dawn dish soap and warm water. I have heard some folks clean their brushes with alcohol. I've just never done that because I always clean mine right afterwards so it doesn't get like super dirty. So one of the things that I noticed with the alcohol is your surface will have tiny little cracks because it doesn't like that alcohol. Okay, so keep that in mind. If you're seeing tiny little cracks coming out on your surface, you might want to check and make sure that you're not using any kind of product in between that contains alcohol, or washing your brush with anything that contains alcohol. This is really difficult. Normally it doesn't take me this long to coat, but I'm trying to talk and do more than one thing at a time. And I apologize if I keep getting out of the camera view. But yes, this is very challenging for me. So that is how I apply it. Now you will have some marks here and there as you're doing that. I typically put it on thick enough that you won't have the brush strokes. Also the air bubbles that I mentioned earlier. come from your layer being too thin and you're creating surface tension as you push down on your brush and try to push that thin layer of Brite Tone. So another thing you can check on in your process is your temperature and humidity. And I'll be honest, they recommend, I think, 50 to 70% humidity, and 68 to 72 is the ideal temp to apply Brite Tone. But I'll be honest, until they started really introducing the grand finale and kind of emphasizing those conditions, I never paid one single bit of attention to it. But maybe I just have a good furnace and it's well controlled. I never had any issues that were related to temperature and humidity, except probably with the grand finale, which I really don't use anymore. So yeah, so that's how I do that. Light pressure. All you want to do is just glide it like very, very easily along that surface. In fact, the more of an angle that you can have, the less pressure you're likely to put on it. So one of the other things that I wanted to talk about is sanding and washing. And I'm going to go, speaking of washing, I'm going to go wash this brush, and I will be right back to talk about sanding and washing. Okay, so real quick before I move on to sanding and washing, I already touched upon it with the alcohol, right? So one of the other things is, you know, as I was washing my brush, you know, I realized that a lot of people may or may not, sorry, I was looking at my project here, may or may not want to spend, you know, a good amount of money on a quality brush. I totally get it, but trust me, if you take really, really good care of it, it will last you a really long time. Like I said, I've had this for pretty much 3 years, okay? And it does great. So what I do is I wash it thoroughly, like I said, with some Dawn, but I also rinse it really thoroughly after. I don't want any of that soap residue. I don't know if you've ever washed your skin in the shower and you feel that soap residue on your skin for a while. So you also want to keep that in mind when you're washing and rinsing your brush. And then the other thing that I do is shake all the excess water out. What you don't want to do is leave a lot of water and moisture up inside where the bristles are connected, and weaken that. So I usually shake it, and then I physically take my fingers and squeeze all the excess water out as much as I can, okay? And then to dry, I dry my brushes in the upright, or the, I guess, with the bristles down. And I have these magnetic clips, and I clip it in, and I have this magnetic pole over here. I clip this in there, and this stays on there, and it dries in the position just like this. So all that water is not pooling in here. All right, so I'm going to put this brush away real quick. We're going to move on to sanding and cleaning. So I have covered sanding in other videos, but I wanted to touch upon something that you're going to have to keep in mind as you're doing this. A few things that I've learned. The first thing is you don't necessarily have to sand Brite Tone. I know in some of my other videos it says sand every 4 to 5 layers. I will tell you, when I found out that that really isn't needed, I was flabbergasted, because I spent a lot of time sanding and washing projects. So let me explain. You can sand, but you do not have to. Previous mindset was every 4 to 5 layers you have to sand and go over it. So in my mind, when I get to 4 or 5 layers on my coasters, I'm done. But if there's an instance where I have to sand something, then to me, it doesn't look good again until you put another 2 layers on after you sand. So, and you don't necessarily have to wait 4 to 5 layers to do your first sand if you're choosing to sand. So I'm going back on previous information in my videos where I say sand every 4 to 5 layers. You do not have to do that. You can, you don't have to. Now, the premise of the sanding, or the purpose of the sanding, is mostly geared towards folks who make tumblers, who use glitter. So it's critical in that instance that they're sanding every 4 to 5 layers. Okay, so I wanted to share that in case you're like me and you've been using Brite Tone a long time and you missed that in one of the feeds on one of the Crystal sites. You do not have to sand. Now, have I sanded? Yes. If there's, something that I'm not liking about it, I do a real light sand. I'm kind of a perfectionist, not 100%, but I do like to sell quality stuff. So just keep that in mind. Do what's best for you. I don't sand very often. Now, the other thing with relation to sanding, hopefully you're using really fine sand sponges. That's kind of critical. You really don't want to use hard sandpaper where you're pushing too hard, because when you're sanding, and check my other videos, you are just lightly, right? You're lightly sanding that surface. If you have raised areas, I've seen a couple of times using Brite Tone, there's a raised like bump. It's like it puddles in that one little area or something. I'm not sure what causes it. You can use magic eraser. It gets rid of those really, really easily. And you can sand in just that one little spot until you get it level with everything else, and then do a full coat of Brite Tone. Now, when you sand, and you're sanding with a fine sandpaper, it leaves a lot of tiny sanding dust on your surface, right? You want it, this is critical, because if you don't properly clean it and let it dry, you're going to create an issue. So please keep this in mind if you go to sand something. It's critical that you clean that surface really well. I've gotten into the habit, after finding and figuring out what is causing these tiny little dots. I thought it was my paint. I thought it was, various things. And I finally figured out that it's the sanding dust. And there's not really a fix for that. Okay. I wish I had an example to show you, but I don't think that I do. And even if I did have one, it would be very difficult to be able to catch it with the naked eye on camera. It's really, really hard to see, and therefore some people may or may not care. I do. That's just the way I am. I was looking for the projects that I did, had a tiny little spot on it. But basically what happens is you're sanding and you think you got all the dust washed off, and there's remnants of it still. If you see tiny little spots where there's just the most minute little dots, they're like perfect. I mean, it's hard to describe, and it's definitely impossible to show you on camera. If I happen to be able to capture it in a picture, I will try. Those spots, if you've seen them, are because you did not wash off the sanding dust thoroughly, okay? So you've got two issues. You want to make sure that you're keeping alcohol off of your project, and you want to make sure you thoroughly clean the surface if you have to sand. And that's why I wanted to share the fact that you don't have to sand, so you can avoid that problem if at all possible, right? So the thing is, with that, once those little dots are in there, I don't know, unless you have like 5 or 6 layers prior to that, I don't know if you can sand back down that far and get rid of them. I will tell you that they fade as you add layers. So just keep that in mind. You know, depends on how visible they are and how much it bothers you. I've had a few tiny ones and I just went with it. Um, the other part of that is if you wash your item and you let it dry. Now, what I usually do is I wash it thoroughly, um, if I can, under the sink, and then I'll let it dry, and then I will take a wet paper towel and wipe it off again. And then I've gotten into the habit of taking a coffee filter, which leaves no lint, and then I have spritzed it with water and washed it with that. So I feel like that has helped the process. I've also, even if there was any doubt that when I was a larger surface, I actually took some press and seal and put that on there. I've even blown it off with the hair dryer just to make sure, and then took the coffee filter over it again. So whatever you figure out is best for you, if you have to get to that point, do it. But I'm just telling you, make sure that you're careful and you clean it thoroughly. The other part of cleaning is drying. One thing that happened to me is I didn't let it dry long enough, and I had always gotten in the habit of, if I'm going to sand, I sand at night. I let it dry overnight, and then I coat the next day. I made the mistake of not waiting long enough, and it will leave like moisture, like spots underneath your layer of Brite Tone. Now, the good news on that one is it will eventually dry. But if you notice that, don't add any more layers, because it will dry a lot quicker, and be a lot less cumbersome if you don't add any more layers until it's done. So just set it aside for 3 to 5 days, check on it, and hopefully you're not in a hurry to get it done, but just set it aside and that will clear up. It just looks like a little cloudy, and that's basically, it's just moisture in there. Just let it dry. What I've done is I've taken a hair dryer to it a couple times during the day as it's drying, if I remember when I come in here, and that does help. So just leave it alone, let it dry, and then once it's all, the cloudiness clears up, proceed. So that's a combination of maybe you didn't let it dry long enough after you washed it, or you put it too thick and there was a little bit of moisture under it. So it could be one or the other or both. So just a few tips and things to keep in mind as you're using the product. Again, I don't particularly pay attention to temperature and humidity like some people do. I do have this little gadget that I purchased when I was trying to work with Grand Finale. It says it's almost 71 degrees in here and 57% humidity, which is pretty much ideal for Brite Tone. But do I always pay attention to the humidity and the temperature? Not really. But I do keep my house in the summer and in the winter, typically between 68 and 72. Now in the morning, it may be colder in here. I have a space heater. I'll heat it up a little bit when in the colder months. And one thing that I also do, and I apologize if you're not a female watching this and you're using Brite Tone, but if my bottle feels at all cold when I'm getting ready to coat something, I'll stick it here and warm it up for 10 or 15 minutes before I coat, and it gets it really warm. And I feel like the warmer it is, the better it flows and moves on your product. Anyway, that's all for today, you guys. I really just wanted to share those tips with everybody. Some additional stuff that I learned to make sure that everybody is, able to use the product successfully. And as always, if you have any issues at all, please reach out. I've troubleshoot all the time, and if there's an issue, I've probably come across it and figured it out and solved the problem, figured out how to avoid it, so I can help you. So please don't struggle with it. If you're having issues, just reach out. I'm here to help. No problem at all. And one last thing that I wanted to say to everyone that watches my videos, if you ordered Crystal-Lac using my affiliate link, I want to give you a huge thank you. I don't do that because I want to make a ton of money. I do that so I can offer anybody that watches my channel any discounts that come along. And by being an affiliate, I'm able to do that. Do I make any money at it? Absolutely not. There's just, for the most part, we don't really get anything. And I use the products. Some of my viewers use the products. Do I expect you guys to remember my affiliate link every time that you order if there's no discount involved? No, I don't. But I just wanted to let everybody know that I do appreciate it when you do use it, and the small amount of income does allow me to continue the testing and the videos and everything else. So much appreciated. I really just wanted to let you guys know that. And obviously I appreciate everybody watches my videos. Thank you for joining me. I will catch you on the next one. Bye now.